I apologize in advance. I will be talking about statistics. So it may not be as exciting as some of the other talks. But I'm Jaime Devine. I'm the Director of Sleep Science at Institutes for Behavior Resources. We are the nonprofit organization that licenses SafetyFast. And today we're talking about using biomathematical modeling as part of the exemption process. Before I get into it, I wanted to outline some of the terms that I'll be using. You'll see that these sometimes differ across regions. So we will be calling IFTSS. You may have also heard it ALTMOC or AMOC, and that is how the IFTSS will be performed as safe or safer than something that is within compliance to the regulation. And I underline this because I will be returning to how do you test for if something is as safe or safer than something else. Safety case is the documentation and the data that you will submit as part of that exemption, and the applicant is the operator who is submitting that. Okay? Here are the EASA flight time limitations in a nutshell. So if you wanted to conduct some operations that either exceed 13 hours, more than 11 hours with your crew in a state of unknown acclimatization or jet lagged, if you want to perform a high number of sectors, having standby or reserve duties followed by flight duties or disruptive schedules, there are limitations that you need to be aware of. And it doesn't mean that you can't do it, but you need to ask for special permission on how to do it. And that is very easy to do through the EASA portal. You'll notice the first bullet point on that list of things that you can do is apply for an AMOC. And I also like that the EASA portal has user guides and presentations to help walk you through this process, and that can be done all online. Here's what will happen when you go to submit your IFTSS. So you will be the applicant. You will submit either through that portal, or you can email it, or you can mail it in if you so desire. And that will go through the National Aviation Authority. And the first step is going to be looking at the organization. Are you in compliance? Are your flights already mature enough, your safety management mature enough? And you can see in that purple box that there are basic requirements that you have to pass by in order to check that box. And that includes, do you have FRM? Do you have training for fatigue risk management? And this is something that you need to have checked off before you can go to the next step. And I will note that your exemption process may have fewer steps than this, depending on what you're asking to do, but this is the more complicated version. So after you check that first step, then they will look at what you're proposing to do. Have you really pointed out why you need this exemption, how it's going to be different, and what you're going to do to mitigate that risk? So once they've looked at that, they will also look at your assessment of the risk. So not only do you have FRM in place at your organization, but have you really listed out all the risks that you would assume or be able to predict for the exemption that you're going to ask for? The fourth step is when they look at what you've submitted for data, what you've submitted as your scientific argument for why you can do this route safely. So that might seem, I'm showing you data, it's the first thing you look at. No, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through just to get your data looked at. And then the fifth step is not the end, it is the beginning. So now you have temporary approval to operate these flights, but you have a window where you need to collect data and analyze that data and resubmit it to demonstrate that you are doing this safely and as safely as something that's within regulations. Okay, And if anyone wants to read the entire document, I've included the QR code where you can go and find this EASA individual flight time specification scheme evaluation documentation online. Okay. So the key components of a safety case, and these are outlined in that document from EASA as well. You want to highlight what the problem is and what your proposed solution is. So here we have a hypothetical example. So flights between destination A and destination B cannot be completed in a 13-hour window. If you want to do a direct flight, it has to be longer. However, this safety case demonstrates that a flight duty period of 17 hours and 45 minutes can be done as safely because we're providing extra in-flight rest opportunities. Next, you want to outline all the risks. And this is not just the risks associated with fatigue, but anything else that you think may be a problem. In this hypothetical example, there is a risk that the pilot would be fatigued upon landing, but maybe there's also a risk that you're flying that far, there'd be a depleted fuel reserve. So if there's a delay or there's a weather event, something may go wrong. You may not have enough fuel on board. So these are the things that you want to outline and explain how you're doing a mitigation. And then thirdly, you want to talk about your science. What are you using as a baseline to compare against? And what method are you using to test whether the flight that's within regulations is equivalent to a flight that you're asking to do, the IFTSS? So the baseline route for this safety case is similar to the proposed IFTSS, but has a 12-hour flight duty period and 2 hours and 30 minutes of in-flight rest. The IFTSS will have 17 hours and 45 minutes, but 4 hours of in-flight rest. And we will prospectively be using biomathematical modeling to compare, and then objective data and subjective fatigue ratings and reaction time tests will be collected once the approval is granted. And then this is where the biomath comes in, because you can't collect data on a flight that you aren't allowed to operate yet. So this is where biomathematical modeling gives you tools to say, what are the differences between this baseline flight, or you may see it safety standard operation, SSO, that's the more American version, and versus your AMOC flight or your IFTSS flight route. So in this case, our SPI that we're using is safety fast effectiveness, where 77%, if you are below that effectiveness, it's considered a fatigue risk. Here we see for the 12-hour baseline flight duty period, they're right at that level. But for our hypothetical extended IFTSS, they're above 77. So I will go on and explain, well, how do you show that these are similar enough? But before I do that, I want to discuss what you need to have for a baseline flight. So first of all, you want to have all of the things that you would model in a flight that you're actually doing. So commute times, brief times, unwind time, anything that would affect the kind of rest that they'd be able to get. And then you also want to make sure that this baseline flight is as similar as possible to your proposed deviation. So, for example, you want it to be a similar duration, same number of time zones crossed, same direction, same aircraft, same kind of rest facilities, same number of aircrew, same time of day, the same level of cabin service, and really anything else. So the goal here is that you are comparing for something that's within limitations, that's as close as possible. So the only question is the deviation that you are asking for. And now we get to what data do you want to collect and what data do you want to submit. So this is a document from the International Air Transport Association that outlines minimum requirements for data collection. Again, there's the QR code, and they outline it as 5 levels, where level 1 is really the minimum. And this includes a fatigue survey, a background survey, very quick, one-time operations. Level 2 is when you're collecting those KSS scores and those Samparelli scores. Level 3, you have someone keeping a sleep diary, maybe a duty diary, and they're just telling you how that's going. Level 4 is when you have an objective measure of sleep, traditionally actigraphy. And level 5 is the objective performance testing. So you need to decide for yourself and your organization what kind of SPIs does it make sense for you to collect. How much data can you get without putting undue pressure on your aircrew that it's going to make it, too hard to collect it or too dangerous to collect it. That's something that you need to decide and submit in the safety case before you ever collect that data and explain why. Okay, now is the statistics. So I find statistics very fun. My apologies if you don't agree with me. This whiteboard represents all possible outcomes. So think about any SPI that you may be using. It can be reaction time, it can be sleep duration, it can be Samparelli, it could be safety fast effectiveness, it can be any of the other model predictions. This is what you get from your baseline. So each one of these dots represents a different response. Now, this represents the data that you get from your IFTSS. Those blue dots aren't completely in line with the black dots, but you wouldn't expect them to be. Everyone's different. How do we show that they're close enough? And that's where the first thing we do is we treat the mean score from those baseline data set as the 0 point. And then there's a bracket on either side where that is the range within that delta. It's considered the zone of indifference. And now we treat baseline like 0, and we plot out what is the mean of your IFTSS scores and what is the confidence interval. And we see if that is falling within the zone of indifference. Here's the problem with most statistics. They're designed to look for differences. So a two-sided t-test is looking to see if you have data in this direction or in the other direction. Oops, sorry for the delay. And using a test that's looking for differences isn't the same as seeing if it's equivalent. Another thing you can do is a one-sided t-test, which, as the name suggests, you're looking for differences in one direction only. These are not the tests that you want to include in your safety case. You want to do a two one-sided t-test. So what you do here is you first run a comparison of baseline to IFTSS. See if there are differences. If there aren't, you've failed that test. That means they're equivalent. Then you compare in the opposite direction. And if you fail that test, then there's no differences in that direction. And now you can conclude that these two data sets are the same. I know this is a little difficult to visualize, so I am going to show an example from the literature. Again, QR code. This is a paper written by Lamp et al. They outline a AMOC that they submitted to the Federal Aviation Administration. This is one of the reasons I included those terms SSO and AMOC, because those are the terms they use in this paper. This paper does a very good job of describing not only the data they collected, but the statistics that they used and why. So you can see they have data on the flight duration, data on in-flight rest, Samparelli, and PVT. You can see what they look like here, but let's see what the tests look like. All right, from this paper, they point out that they are only considering failure when the differences are falling below that lower delta. So for example, if the IFTSS flight has less sleep or more fatigue, then it's not safe. It's not as safe. However, if they have more sleep or less fatigue, it's different, but it's safer than something that's within the limits, and so that is acceptable. Here we have the in-flight rest. In dark gray was their AMOC or their IFTSS flight. In light gray was their baseline flight. From these two bar graphs, you can see that they were getting more sleep on the AMOC flight relative to baseline. So their statistics showed that the mean was much higher than that 0 point from the baseline, but in the right direction. In contrast, their PVT results look exactly the same, and that is what the statistics showed as well. So these are the kinds of tests that you want to run and charts that you want to show to help you visualize that the data you've collected shows that this new flight that's outside the limitations can be performed safely. And then you can bring that data back into the model. So for example, in our original safety case, we said that someone, maybe they would be getting 8 hours and 15 minutes within the 24 hours before their landing, but that was an assumption. And their PVT in this case was 124 milliseconds. Now that we have that objective sleep data, you can use that and model that instead. And so what we found with the actual data is they got 5 hours and 23 minutes within 24 hours of top of descent, and their PVT was slower, not only from the prediction, but also when they did a real PVT. So what you do here is you either include in that safety case, yes, in our initial safety case, we were correct, or you say we were not correct. And this is what we're changing to mitigate the risks that we either didn't catch correctly, or to make sure that we're doing this as safely as possible and we're checking all those boxes. So I'm including a QR code because there were some questions earlier about what are the differences across regions. And IATA has this document where you can see the beginning of the chart at the bottom where they say what the kind of limitations related to fatigue is. And then they list out by region, where are those, what are they called, what are the limitations, and that gives you a very good resource for comparing across regions. I'll also note that EASA has global cooperation. So there's international cooperation agreements with a number of regions, United States, Canada, Brazil, China, and Japan. There's also a special relationship between EASA and the FAA, where as long as certain criteria are met, if you have an approval on one, it's frequently considered approved for the other. And then finally, I showed you the EASA portal in the beginning. You do not have to be based in Europe to access the EASA portal. So United States, Canadian, or Brazilian applicants can use that portal as well. And if anyone's wondering where any of this data came from, here are my resources. And thank you very much for your time.
Do come up. Fantastic, thanks for that. So we'll move straight on to the next presentation with Marco Reeb from Condor Airlines. Marco, love the tie, very on brand.
Yeah, on brand, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our hosts at this moment. I'll take the opportunity until my slides are ready to thank you, the whole team, for your work, for that wonderful meeting over here. Thank you very much. And it's an honor for me to being here and to present you just another FRMS approach.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
It worked out.
Okay. Yeah. So, just another example I want to give you how we deal with fatigue, how we set up our fatigue risk management system, just as another example from an airline. I'm captain and fatigue risk manager, so after listening to the scientists, which I loved very much, because I think this could be one of the ways. In the end, well, you have to find your own way how you can manage fatigue in your company, and it has to fit to you and to your operation. This is one of the major points I want to figure out. What I'm presenting to you is just one way you could do this. I also love the approach from the colleagues from Transavia or from the other colleague here. Everyone needs to find his own way. So who are we from Condor? This is our history. We came from vacations. Condor is or was vacation, and vacations are striped, as you can see on my tie. This is just our branding. This is our history. We were one of the big German vacation airlines. Nowadays, we are just in a transformation process, and we're changing from just a leisure airline to also become a business airline, as you would call it nowadays, a pleasure airline. And this transformation also brings some challenges to our fatigue risk management system, which we now run for over than 8 years. And so we will go into details, and I want to bring together the scientific approach and an operational approach, just to build some bridges. This is our operation, what we do. So just some figures. We are based in Germany. We are flying all over the world. We have our hub in Frankfurt, but also some other points, for example, in Hamburg, Düsseldorf, or Munich, and some smaller spots in Berlin, Leipzig, Stuttgart, or even in Palma de Mallorca or Zurich, just to point out some of these. And on the next slide, you will see, as colorful as this map is, as colorful as our operation, we are doing long-haul flights, medium-haul flights, short-haul flights, and now even city pairs, very short-haul flights. And these are some challenges for our fatigue risk management system, as you can think of. So why? Why do we do FRMS? I will start with a quote from the famous Galileo Galilei, and this is our scientific approach: measure what is measurable and make measurable what is not so. I think Jaime and also Thomas gave us some brilliant introduction to this. But another thing, being a pilot, we have to realize fatigue is not experienced in spreadsheets or in models. It is experienced on the flight deck and in the cabin. So let's build a bridge between scientific approach and just an operational approach. On one hand side, we need scientific approaches, we need biomathematical models to measure what is measurable. On the other side, and I see this in your questions this morning, how can we bring that operational issues into that context? And this is our idea how you could do this. So let's talk about how we handle the fatigue risk in our company. We have on one hand side the biomathematical model, I will tell you later on which one, and on the other side we have the operational experience. We all bring this together in figures. We are getting some figures from the model, and we get experience from our crews, but also from our departments working for us, and we all bring this together in big figures in the so-called Condor FRMS matrix. I will show you what this is. And the Condor FRMS matrix is the baseline for the work in our Fatigue Safety Action Group. In the Fatigue Safety Action Group, which I will show you in the next slide, we're dealing with all fatigue risk issues of our company, and we work out for mitigations. So when we evaluated the fatigue risk of our operation, and if we find mitigations, we will commute this all over the company. Everybody in the system is important. Everybody has a voice, and everybody needs to work on this. So we start from the very upper management down to each cabin crew member, each pilot, everyone doing duty on the airplane. So the Fatigue Safety Action Group is a very, very important group in our company, and as we saw this morning already, there is one word on this slide which I really want to put stress on it: trust. Trust of everybody working in this system. Trust in the system, but trust also in the other members working with fatigue. So our Fatigue Safety Action Group is parity-based, and you see we have some neutral persons, the chairman, that's me, the fatigue risk manager, and my vice chairperson, the fatigue risk representative. She is ill today, sorry, can't be here, and she is a cabin crew member. This is also important for me, not only represent the cockpit, but also the cabin in the chairpersons. And as we are integrated part of the SMS, the safety management system at our company, the director of safety management is also at that round table. This is just the neutral persons. Now, you might say there are two sides of that table. On one side, the employer side, and you see we have the senior management. We have persons who are able and willing to make decisions. The director of fleet, director of cabin crew, and director of crew scheduling, all together. And on the other side, because this is very important for us, we have the employees with us. Representatives of staff at the moment, two from the cockpit, one from the cabin. This is interchangeable. We don't mind, but it's important to have these with us as well. So it's a system of trust and a system of voices. Voices to be heard from everybody in this process. So now, as you see, we have one dimension, and this is the biomathematical side. But this is only one. On the other side, if it works, there are three other dimensions. That brings into our matrix the operational experience. And now I'm gonna stroll with you through this system, how we bring together biomathematic and operational experience. In the end, to make the fatigue safety action strong, that they can discuss on fact basis, not only on opinions, but that we really look deep into our operation. So this is, now you see, sorry Jaime, I like yours as well. However, we decided on BAM and Thomas this morning, you might have seen these as well. We get some information from the Boeing alertness model. We get values from that, and we also use that concert program, as Thomas introduced this morning to you, that this is a tool for the Fatigue Safety Action Group. I could put stress on this. It helps us to see where are our fatigue spots around the world. As you have seen, we have a very colorful operation. But these are only models, and they don't live. Who lives? Our crews. So we want to bring them into the system, in the matrix, as I said, and we use three other dimensions. Biomathematical thing, one dimension. Now we come to the second dimension. We're looking here first in the second dimension of the cockpit. We look at the approaches our crews have to fly. As your flying experience might teach you, if you're doing an approach, for example, let's take Frankfurt where I'm from, good ATC surrounding, good runways, the terrain is not that critical, it's your home base, you're used to this, then it's a little bit easier to do that approach. And there are other airports, for example here in Split, where you have short runway, you have a significant terrain. Or if we're looking on the long-haul fleets, if you're going to the Seychelles, an isolated aerodrome procedure you have performed over there you need much more vigilance maybe. And this is what we're taking into account, giving points to the approach that has to be expected in the second dimension. How is the ATC surrounding? Is it a standard phraseology I can expect there? Or am I flying to some areas we are not quite familiar with? For example, going to China, even have to deal with a metric system, then you need more vigilance than as you are operating in an area you are familiar with. Also talking about the Seychelles, for example, the weather plays an important role. Do I just have to expect the sky is clear, or do I have to deal with thunderstorms? Do I have to cross the inner tropical convergence zone, etc. pp. And last but not least, also, which kind of approach type do I have? Do I just have to follow an ILS, or do I have to fly maybe a complicated visual approach? All this will give a value in the end. This is put into our matrix, and in the end, in the complete fatigue risk evaluation. But this is only the cockpit. On the second side, we have our colleagues in the cabin. And there we look in the second dimension, what kind of service do they have to do, what kind of passengers we have to expect on this, how many legs do they have to perform during one pairing, and how about the rest time that comes from the two other things, how is the rest possibility on board. This altogether gives one figure of 4. Then we're coming to our reporting system. This is a very important thing. We have a big automated reporting system within our company, within the safety department of our company. This is why I'm located at the safety department as well. As I said, trust is a very, very important value dealing with these things, the trust of our crews. And they are asked, and they do so, to report in the third dimension everything that deals with the destination. For example, how are the hotels they have to stay? How is the quality of rest in the hotels? Is it a wonderful hotel as we are staying here, where no noise, you can relax perfectly, or are there some issues we should know from the Fatigue Safety Action Group to deal with and to get rid of these? And even we look into transportation, as you can think, if you arrive at a destination, you have a long-haul flight done and maybe 12 hours on your clock, and now you have to ride another 2 hours with a bus. This might be fatiguing. However, we also look at, is the transportation time as short as we want it to be, or are there some actual issues, for example, some building areas and a lot of traffic jams, and then we can react to this. And you see, this would change our overall fatigue risk assessment of one destination. All done over the matrix, as you can see down there. In the end, we ask our crews, and they are all trained in this, and they are quite familiar with fatigue reporting. We ask our crews, give us the information what you are experiencing on a special flight, on a special pairing, and we collect all this data together, bring it into a figure. We build an SPI out of that to deal in the fourth dimension. What does one crew member got during his duty. What do they have to deal with? And these all together come into our matrix and in the overall evaluation. Don't want to go too much into detail of this because we want some time at the end to discuss. However, what we do, we approach fatigue on several levels. We try on the long-haul flights to deal with the pairings. There are just coming from the biomathematical model some values that we say, okay, these are no problems, so we don't have to look closer to these. However, there might be some on the edge. Then we will look very closely on this using the complete matrix I just introduced to you. We also can do this on rostering and using the programs that were introduced this morning. And we can also reflect on SPIs there. Are our thresholds correct, or do we have to change them? And of course, in tracking as well. And we are about to work with a long-term planning that we don't build pairings or rasters that might be fatiguing. So we are learning from our system and changing things before they are built. This is just what we think about the system. So we have several challenges. What we learned, you need to approach in our operation from several sites. On long-haul flights, the best fatigue approach is via pairing. The fatigue action group meets every month, and we look at each pairing that is to be flown the next 2 months, and we deal with that. We use the whole matrix, we're using all fatigue reports, we're using all the knowledge we have about that pairing, putting it into the system and looking where do we need to mitigate. On the short medium haul flight, we see if we are using our biomathematical model, there are other amplitudes than in the short medium haul flights. And therefore, we use an automatic planning system with defined thresholds, which we always use our reporting from the crews. Are these thresholds correct, or do we have to change the thresholds? That you don't have to deal with the big amplitudes of the biometric model, but with the pairings planned after each other. This is just a summary of what I gave you of our matrix. So you see the blue one, the biomathematical thing, is just one column of 4. And to make it an evidence approach to fatigue risk management, as I want to call it, we use these other 3 columns to give the best reality together with the model we can do. And this is how we think about the system, how we can reflect on our operation. And I wish to you that you can find your way to build and to show your operation using reporting system, using knowledge from the crews, together with biomathematical models. And this is just a brief example how we do this, how it works. For example, we get from a biomathematical model the information about a flight from Frankfurt to Punta Cana. We see what the model is giving us here. It says, okay, it's approaching the threshold. So we are looking closer to it. We want to know, can we accept this risk or not? Do we have to spread it? And so we add information to this model. We look into the reporting of our crews, and they tell us, for example, that the model is calculating a nap before you're doing your flight back with a 2-man cockpit through the night. And this is a good thing, then you can do it. But our crews inform us that there are, for example, building areas in the hotel, and you cannot do that nap before your night flight. So we inform that model and change it. And as you see, the amplitude changes. And now it comes to a threshold we don't accept. So we need to change something in that system. We need a mitigation. And this is, for example, talk to the hotel, find solutions at the destination. How can we grant that nap to our crews that we can take this risk? If this mitigation doesn't work, we have to look for the next one. The same thing you could do for the cabin crew. Just a brief intro to this. We had a flight from Phuket, for example, and we were told by our crews that with that short rest time, it's hard to do the flight back, even or especially when all the passengers are in another rhythm than they are. They are awake, they are want to have a lot of things, the work is really hard. So what we did, we said, okay, we will change the rest time. We will give them an enhanced rest time after that before we are bringing them to the next duty. This is how we deal with roster, just as one more example. This is all about, you see, shared responsibility. On one hand side, the operator does something, and on the other hand, we have our crews, and we trust in each other. And we talked this morning about the unfit process, and this is where we see a big point of the shared responsibility. So coming to an end, this is what I want to share with you. The question, am I fit to fly? Every one of us have to answer before starting flight duty. If you don't have an unfit process, the crews might just tend to report sick. But this is not what we want them to do. We want to know that there is something in the system we should change. And not to help our crews to decide on whether am I fit or not fit to fly, we used that prior sleep wake model and modified it to our operation as we need it, and we created some kind of checklist. Our crews, if they are not quite sure, should I report unfit or not, they can scroll through, and in the end, they will get an answer based on facts. If they say everything is fine, okay, let's go fly. If they come out and it turns out, no, I should use the unfit process, then they call in unfit, and they will be granted another full rest period. After that full rest period, they will write a fatigue report, because we want to inform our system again about the facts that our crews are reporting unfit, that we can ask ourselves why, where, when. And after this rest period, they can decide again, am I fit to fly or not? And what we do with that fatigue report, we bring it into our system to give it more information at all. This is the prior sleep wake model, how we modified it for our use. You see it, it's very colorful, it's giving some examples for the crews just to deal with it in the most easy way. And this is the last side of our fatigue risk management manual, so it's even easy to find for the crews. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming to an end. I know fatigue risk management, it's a learning system, and as we are here, and I see we're sticking to the same end of the stick all together. Here in Split, we are not split, we are a union, we have the same ideas, and I'm looking forward to continue this together with all of you. The conclusion of us is, all models are wrong. This is hard, I know, but some are useful. This is a quote from George Box, and we use the useful ones. And our experience at Condor shows that models become most useful, and we need them, when they are continuously aligned with operational and crew experience. What we are about to do is improving the FRMS, continuously work on the shared responsibility, continue the dialogue with our crews. It is important to keep in dialogue with them to found trust in the system. We make our reporting more and more intuitive. However, we have a very good trustful reporting. The crews tell us a lot what they experience, and we try to start very early mitigations before it comes to being fatigued. And just think out of the box and welcome each of you. We are looking for cooperations. Just address me afterwards. We are not just staying within the aviation industry, we also working together with some hospitals and other cooperations that we are dealing. We are not an island in aviation. And so, altogether, my wish for you, let's never get tired of keeping flight operations safe. Thank you very much.
If you and Jaime maybe could take a seat, maybe take the middle, somewhere in the middle, rather than the edge, and we'll see we'll go through the questions that we have, if we can share those. So I can see them on my screen, so maybe I come to the first one. We've got a question from Marco. How are FRMS thresholds determined, and what does it mean operationally when you say you verify whether they're correct?
This is not working.
Oh, we've got... Try it now. Try now.
Yeah, okay, now it's working. Yeah, this is a question going pretty much into details. Well, if you use some models, if you use some planning tools, you have the possibility to define thresholds. For example, using a special KSS value, a CAS value, or something like that. And you need to watch and stroll through the reporting you get from your crews to see whether these thresholds are correct or not. And if you're using some SPIs on that, you can do this quite easily.
Jaime, as we go through these, if you have any comments, feel free to add anything in. There's a few questions for Marco as we go through here. Would you say that you've implemented appropriate FRM going beyond the basic requirements for night flights and late arrivals? If so, why?
Okay, this is a question you should ask our crews, I think. We have an appropriate FRM, and we continually work on this to improve it. I think in some parts it's going beyond, and in other parts it's a learning system, and there's always room to improve.
Fantastic, thanks. Another one for you. What's the crew participation rate of reporting? How quick things can be changed should you have a significant number of reports?
Okay, I hope our CEO don't mind if I bring this figure to the conference. However, I learned from our authorities as well that this figure is a very healthy one, and it's a healthy system we do. It's not just occurrences that we have, but there are a lot of information crew arms that are crews giving to us, and therefore it's around 90 to 120 reports. So I think we can work with this in a confidential way.
Excellent, great, thanks. Jaime, a question for you. You mentioned actigraphy. What is your view on commercial wearable devices for sleep measurement?
Thank you for the question. I have many thoughts on consumer wearables. We actually just recently published a review of what are the advantages and shortcomings for these consumer wearables, specifically for FMRS and aviation. So for the interest of time, I won't get into too many details, but please find me. I think at the end of the day, we still have some tests we need to run to show that they're working well enough. And then we need the regulators and the authorities to catch up with that guidance. For example, IATA's guidance on data collection is 10 years old. It predates a lot of these more modern wearables, and it sort of overlooks the fact that the technology has progressed.
So if it helps, I have a new Garmin watch, and it's a continual source of debate in our house, how accurate or not it is. So I'm going to go and find your report, and we'll add that note into our meeting notes. So that's really good. Another one then from Marco. How big is your FRM team to ensure analysis on each pairing every month from multiple destinations? And then if it's possible, what are the responsibilities for the team members?
Yeah, the core group is just the fatigue risk manager and my deputy. So this is almost a full-time job to do this. However, it's not only us, it's the whole fatigue safety action group. And as you have seen, these are 8 people from our company, all over, spread over the company.
That makes sense, yeah. And you also answered the question on number of fatigue reports. You said 90, 120. Is that in a year?
Yeah, this is quite easy. We just had some changes due to season, yeah. So if you just put together 90 to 120, you get the figure.
Okay. Where are we? How is the training performed for crew members? How is the initial training and recurrent training conducted?
We have several approaches to that. We have the possibility to do a computer-based training. We just did this the last year. We produced this training by ourselves to represent our operation in the training as much as any possible. However, we have linked it to the crew resource management training as well. So we do it as a classroom training. For initial training, it makes sense that you can come into discussions and to answer questions in this complex thing, just to make it as a classroom training, for example. You also could think of a web-based training. We didn't do this yet, however, we do this in SMS, for example, and there are several approaches to that. Important thing is keep everybody in the training. We don't only do this for our crews, as you're asking, we also do it for all the staff in our planning department.
Fantastic, thanks. So you include aircrew representatives in your FSAG. Beyond building trust, why do you think that's important? And does it help building a good culture? I guess.
That's a complex question, but the answer is quite easy. Yes, trust is everything you need. You need a good safety culture.
Yeah.
I'll add to that one. I mean, there are studies that show that if your flight crew are fatigued, it might not be a safety concern immediately, but it is a reputation concern, that they will not be as courteous. They will also be more susceptible to getting sick and, turnover, having those days off. So involving the flight crew and treating them as members of the team who need to be respected just as much as the pilots, even though, they may not have an immediate safety concern, there are definitely other concerns that should be addressed and they should be considered. And considered, more than trust, more than company culture, they're a part of the team.
Yeah, and actually, as we saw, some of us were at the Dispatch World Unruly Passenger Conference last week in Lisbon, and certainly the feeling we got there was that particularly cabin crew get the brunt of what is an increasing challenge with unruly passengers, and the more we can make them feel part of the team in that context, I think really helps as well. So,
yeah, if there's an emergency, they're probably going to be the first ones to respond, and if they're incapable of making good decisions, that is a concern.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent, thanks. What KSS score would generate a red no-go level? That's very specific.
It's a very specific question, and I'm sorry to say I can't give you a specific answer to that, because it is your risk, and it's your decision what you can accept or what you don't want to accept.
And I can imagine, Jaime, you've probably got some thoughts on kind of the use of black or white, kind of fixed.
Yeah, I think those KSS scores, sometimes it's hard to know what one person's 3 is versus another's. I recommend looking at how it changes. So if you have someone who, when they're well rested, they always say 3, and they go to a 5, that would be the same as someone who always says they're a 1 jumping to a 3. And so don't treat it as something that one score means one thing, but look at how the individual changes their own personal rating.
Yeah. And I think we have individuals in that system, and it's not just about the well-being of one individual crew member, but it's to spread the risk over your operation and to know what is going on in your operation. And therefore, you really have to find your own thresholds.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks very much for that. Your long-haul focuses on pairings. Do you also look at the whole roster, such as east-west transitions?
Yeah, I love that question because this is really a discussion just going on, and I learned this morning that this is a discussion that concerns a lot of us sitting here in this area. Our fatigue safety action group is just working on that topic indeed. Yeah, and I can't give you a final answer at that very moment, but we recognize it using the models that there is work to do. Dealing with pairings, dealing with rosters, and see the influence. We find some new thresholds, we find some new borders, we find some new rules at the moment in the discussion together with everybody in the fatigue action group and all the parties in that.
Yeah, and I guess you've done quite a lot of work on these kinds of things as well.
I mean, we do. So many of our users will focus on pairings, they'll focus on rosters. I think at the point where I'm involved, there's a question lower down, how are you sure it's aligned with operational reality and meaningful information? For us, that's when I get called in and I'm collecting data, running statistics, doing comparisons, and that's my job. So I'm not doing pairings unless they need some context from the scientific perspective.
You're doing more of the other things. Is there anything else on that last question, that bottom question there? How do you ensure BMM is aligned?
Yeah, I mean, you can look up my papers. We try as much as possible to make the analyses that we do publicly available. There are odds ratios, there are statistics. We use a lot of survey. My background is neuroscience. It is not modeling. So I come from the perspective of the human biology first, and how can we describe that with math?
Yeah, you already got this. I see the time is running up, but I want to answer to that question. How do we communicate with our crews? I think communication is a very, very important thing you must do in this topic. We do individual feedback if someone asks us. We can also do an analysis with someone coming to me, say, have a look, there is a raster that is very hard. What do you think about it? Then I will take time and go with him or her, for example, through the biomathematical graph, look into the reporting what we had. And we also, not only quarterly, we communicate after each fatigue safety action group to our crews what we decided in the fatigue safety action group, and that they have a feeling your report is heard and your report brings a change. It is important.
Excellent. What a great thing to finish on, I think. So thank you very much to the two of you.